Hey friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and today we're in the kitchen and we are going to be pickling some peppers. So if you want to see what we're doing, stick around. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around. Well, if your garden's like mine, you've got a lot of peppers coming out of your garden right now. And we've got the tomatoes still going full speed ahead. We've got peppers. Our apple trees need to be picked. And so we've got several things that we need to get harvested and processed so that we can get them preserved and on our pantry shelves. So today I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with some of my peppers. Now, so I know with my bell peppers, I'll be slicing them into strips or chunking them up and putting them into freezer bags and freezing them because I love to have frozen bags of peppers to add to dishes that I'm cooking throughout the winter. We go through a lot of those. My hot peppers, like my jalapenos, we can freeze whole, or I can dry them and then grind them up for a hot pepper powder. We've got a few little red chili peppers. We can either string those and dry them, or I can dry them and then crush them and make a hot pepper powder or a seasoning with those. So there's several things that we can do with them. I have in the past done several different canning methods and have not really gotten too excited about canned peppers. I've pickled them, the small ones, in a big jar, and they were okay, but there's only so many of those you can eat. I have just canned straight bell peppers, and those are fine. You can add those to dishes and all that, but the frozen peppers are so much easier to do, and they don't take a lot of space in our freezer, so I really prefer the frozen ones over the canned. We've done some marinated ones, and those are pretty good. Some of the cowboy candy, and that's good, but it's really hot, so only a little bit of that is something that we can consume. But I'm trying to find a good recipe for a pepper that would be good on sandwiches, kind of like you'd see at the delis. We have the pepperoncini peppers that you can get in jars, and those are really good. I tried growing pepperoncini peppers last year, and I grew several of them, but just not as many as I would have liked to. And I hadn't found a good recipe. I want one that has some sweetness, but not like cowboy candy, and one that doesn't have an overwhelming vinegar taste, but something that would just taste just the right sweetness and saltiness on a sandwich. And I think maybe I might have found it. Now, I have found a recipe, and this one comes from the National Center for Home Food Preservation, which is the USDA. And their recipes are tested, so they are considered safe recipes. And it's for a pickled bell pepper. And it's got sugar, vinegar, water, a little bit of garlic, a little bit of salt. And that sounds kind of like what I'm looking for. I find some of them that have like a teaspoon of sugar, but I want more sweetness. I think a little more sweetness to kind of tone down that vinegar would be good. So this one has about equivalent amounts of sugar and vinegar, but then it also has water, so it won't be as the syrupiness of cowboy candy. So this one calls for bell peppers, sweet bell peppers, and you cut them in slices. Well, I know that according to the USDA and the National Center for Home Food Preservation, that you can swap out any kind of pepper in a canning recipe. And so that's what I'm going to do. So instead of using the bell peppers in this recipe, we are going to use the banana peppers, and these are the sweet banana peppers. Now, if you don't have sweet banana peppers and you have another kind of pepper that you would like to use, by all means do that. You can mix and match too. The only rule is you can't increase the amount of peppers in the recipe. You have to keep that equivalent. Otherwise, if you increase it, it throws the acidity off, because peppers are a non-acidic food. So knowing that, whenever you see a recipe that has peppers in it, according to the USDA, you can swap any kind of pepper. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to turn these into a sweet pickled pepper. So it's really simple, and I'm going to show you how. The first thing we're going to do is we are just going to mix up our brine mixture, and it's a really simple brine. All it is, and before we get started, I want to tell you, normally I'm doubling a recipe when we're canning, but today I'm only doing half a recipe because this one makes 9 pints if it's a full batch, and I want to try it out before I make that much. So I'm just halving it, which you can do. As long as you keep your ratios the same, you can half. So I will give you the link to this recipe in the description box below, and just know that we are swapping. The only thing we're changing is the type of pepper. We're keeping everything else the same, and I am just doing half a batch. I'll tell you what I'm adding, but I'll also tell you what the recipe says for the full batch. So the first thing we're going to add is, for a full recipe, it's going to be 3.5 cups of sugar. For a half recipe, it's going to be 1 3/4 cup of sugar. Now, you're probably thinking that's a lot of sugar, but in my experience, now I haven't made this yet, but in my experience, once you make this, there's always brine left over. It may be different with these, but I've made lots of different pickled peppers, pickled vegetables, pickled cucumbers, and you make a brine, and usually you have a lot of brine left over. So even though we've got quite a bit of sugar in it, it's not going to all be in the peppers. And again, this is a big batch. So, and usually we eat the peppers, not the juice. So there's going to be sugar in the peppers, but not overwhelming. So I added 1 3/4 cup for half a batch. We need, according to a single recipe, 3 cups of vinegar. So I'm just adding 1.5 cups. Now you can add any vinegar, white or the apple cider vinegar, as long as they're 5% acidity. I mix the two together, and I'm adding 1.5 cups, because that's half of the 3 cups, 1.5 cups of a mixture. The white vinegar is going to be, it's kind of keeps your pickled items in a clear solution. It's more acidic as far as stronger tasting, whereas the apple cider vinegar is a little more mellow and a little more sweet. So I thought I'm just going to mix the two and put them both in here, but you can add either one of those vinegars. Then we're going to add 1.5 cups of water. So it's being diluted down with water. And that's all we're adding to the brine. Isn't that simple? Sugar, water, and vinegar. Now, we're going to have salt and garlic in our jars when we jar it up. But right now, we're going to put this on the stove, and we're going to boil it for 1 minute. When 1 minute's up, I'll bring you back. So we have boiled that brine for 1 minute. And the next thing we have to do is just add our peppers. And I'll see if I can do that without getting a big mess. Now, when you first add peppers to this, you're going to think, oh no, I don't have enough brine, because the peppers are going to be over the brine, just like this. It's okay. They're going to cook down just a little bit, and they will be under that brine. They'll also let off some of their own water. So now we just put this back on the burner, and we are just going to cook it till it comes back to a boil. It's not hard at all. So once it comes back to a boil, we're going to come back. While this is coming up to a boil, I'm going to get all my jars and everything set up. And make sure that if you are using a water bath method, that you turn your water on about now, because you're going to need to get that water nice and hot and bubbly by the time you get these in the canner. So here we go. Okay, we've brought it to a boil, and the peppers have melted down into the liquid. I don't know if you can see that. So it looks like we're going to be good on our brine. This recipe uses half pints and pints to can in. Now remember, you can always go down in size but keep the processing time the same, but you can't go, it's not recommended that you go up a size in your jars if there's no time given, just because there's no way of knowing how much time. So it's not recommended to go up in a jar size. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some pints and some half pints. I'm going to fill up my half pints first, because that's a really good size to have, and then we'll fill up our half pints. And remember, a full recipe was 9 pints, so I'm thinking 4 to 5 pints of the pickled peppers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a slotted spoon, and I'm going to fill up my 2 of my half pints first. And I'm just going to get the peppers right now. And you're wanting to pack those peppers in. And I can pack them better in just a minute, but I'm just filling them all the way to the top. And we will push those down and pack them in here in a minute. Now, I want to say one more thing about this recipe. I earlier said that we are going to be changing one thing, and that one thing was just a different kind of pepper. And we're using banana peppers instead of the bell peppers. There is one other thing I want to say that I'm changing. The processing time for this pickled pepper is just 5 minutes. Now, I have not seen any other pickled pepper or pickled veggie that I've noticed to be only 5 minutes processing time. If you only do 5 minutes of processing time, you have to sterilize your jars and your lids. Because according to the USDA guidelines, anything that's canned or processed for 10 minutes or more gets sanitized in the process of canning, and so you don't need to sanitize any of your jars or lids if it's 10 minutes or more of processing. This is 5 minutes, so if I stick with 5 minutes, I have to sanitize and sterilize. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and can 10 minutes. And I feel safe at doing that because, like I said, I've not seen any other pickled vegetable or pepper that has been 5 minutes. It might change the texture a little bit. It might make it not quite as crispy, but it's not really the crispiness that I'm looking for. It's the flavor. So I'd like to use these on sandwiches. So that's all right. I don't think 5 extra minutes of processing is going to hurt it that much. So just be sure that you sanitize your jars if you are only doing 5 minutes. All right. So what we also need to do, and I've got a few more in there. I think I'm going to wait until I see what I need to put in these jars, and then whatever's left I'm going to put in this one, and I think I'm going to keep it open for us to try. Okay, so now before I put my juice in, I'm going to add the clove of garlic and the salt. Now it says place half a clove of garlic and 1/4 teaspoon of salt in each sterile half pint. So I need to use half a clove for my half pints. And then it said double the amount for your pint jars. So that means you will use a full clove for your pint jars. So let me go ahead and put half. Some of these are bigger than others. That's a half of one. That's a half of one. And then whole one, and a whole one. And whatever we have left will be that one. And then let's do our salt. We need to add 1/4 teaspoon to the half pints. And we need to add half a teaspoon for the pints. And I'm just putting them in right here. Okay. Now we'll put the brine on them. And so when we put the brine on them, I'm going to use a ladle. We're going to go, I think, 1/2 inch. Yep, 1/2 inch headspace. And then we're going to use a debubbler or a wooden skewer. And we're going to push down and check and make sure there's no bubbles. Now, it's really easy to get bubbles with these peppers because they are very chunky. So just really debubble good. Just push out the air and see if you've got it pretty. You don't want them to be too loosely packed, otherwise you're going to have them all floating at the top and then there's going to be brine at the bottom. So you want them to be fairly well packed. So I think I can add just a few more to this jar. And then we're going to add our brine. And this is hot. These jars are hot. And when you debubble, a lot of times you need to add a little more brine because the water has filled up those air holes. And you need a little more to make a 1/2 inch headspace. Now, I'd probably wait a couple of weeks before you open up one of the jars because that garlic will be infusing some flavor in there. And then also the brine will be pickling those peppers and getting them full of flavor. So I would hold off on opening one for a couple of weeks. And you know what? I think this recipe is going to have a really good ratio of brine to pickles. That's great. I hate it when there's so much that you feel like you're going to waste it. I usually keep my brine because I a lot of times will do another pickle of some sort and I can reuse the brine. And I'll show you what we have left. It's going to be just enough for us to sample. There we go. If we didn't pack our jars quite as full, we could have gotten, let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 4 pints. We could have gotten 4.5 if we didn't have them packed as well as we have, but this is perfect for us. So let's give one a taste real quick before we put our lids on. Just get one of those green banana peppers. I like that. I don't have any salt in this. Let me put a little salt in that one. But that's got a nice sweetness, but not really overwhelming. You know, that means I have to try another one. And then, of course, the garlic hasn't had a chance to infuse its flavor either. But we'll get that salt in there. That's going to be a really good sandwich pickle. I can tell that the flavor is just peppery. You don't get a lot of other seasonings and stuff like that. And it's just got a hint of sweetness and a hint of saltness and a hint of saltiness. And that's really good. I'll clean one of these jars in case you are new to canning and you need to see how we do this. Once you get your jars full and you've debubbled, we are going to take, let me grab a paper towel. We are going to take a paper towel and some white vinegar, and we are just going to go around the rim and clean that sugary water off. It's going to be sticky, and this vinegar will clean it right off. We're going to put a flat lid on, and these are all clean but not sterile. We're going to put a ring on, just finger tip tight. So we're going to do that to all of them. Then I'm going to put them in. I've got my steam canner heated up. It's ready to go. As soon as I get these lids on, I'm going to put it in that, and I'll show you once I get over to the steam canner. So I'll bring you right back. Okay, so I've got this all out on the canner, or in the canner, the steam canner. And it looks like we got all of those to fit fine. We're going to put it in. The water's boiling, and we just need to bring it up to temperature, and then remember, process for 10 minutes. When 10 minutes is up, I'm going to turn off the flame, and we are just going to let it process or set for 10 minutes to kind of acclimate to the temperature change. And then we'll put them on the counter. I just want to say I was nibbling on these peppers while I was finishing up the lids and the debubbling, and they are really good. I am going to be making more of these this year. Since I just made a half a batch, I'm going to be using a lot more banana peppers to use with this recipe. It is a really good one, and I think we're going to be eating this one, whereas the other ones we just didn't care for that much, and we'd open a jar, have a few out of them, and then they'd sit in the refrigerator, and we'd never finish them. But I can see these going really quick. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing. Also, please comment, share, and like. We would really appreciate that. So hope to see you next time. Have a great week. Bye-bye.